Okay, this is part 2 for Sissonville High School, the video lecture for gender. Just like before, you'll want to be taking notes because you won't have any PowerPoint printouts for this. So I'm going to backtrack for a second. We were talking about the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and privilege between men and women. In this country, it exists. Women are still devalued. They make less than men. They don't hold as many positions of power as men in politics or within the business industries in this country. So we'll move on to how men and women are treated. Are men and women treated differently based upon their gender or sex? And I would submit to you that they are. And you guys can think to yourselves how this could be true. And it sounds like a joke, but it's really not. A woman walks into a bar. I'm going to tell a quick story, a true story, about gender. I remember I was at I'll be brief, I promise. I remember I was at a Christmas party with my wife, and it was at it really wasn't a bar as much as it was just kind of like a restaurant, but it had like a little bar component, I guess, off to the side. And I was with her, and it was for her place of work. And I remember kind of being a little bored, and I walked around the corner, and I noticed this bar area. But more importantly for me, I noticed that there were television sets, like 10 of them. And it was during football season, bowl season, and there were like 2 or 3 bowl games on. So I was like very happy because I found my place. So I standing in the back watching the games, and I noticed that there are all men in this bar. And this woman, looks like she maybe had just gotten off of work, comes in, attractive young woman, sits down at the bar, and basically takes her hand and just kind of puts it on the side of her face, like she's kind of leaning on it, like she's tired or, just kind of chilling out or whatever. And you can see there are 5 guys in the corner huddled like a bunch of football players. And you can almost hear them whispering to each other. Yeah, go try it. Go ask her. Then another guy would say, no, you go first. You go first. So I'm thinking, uh-oh, this could go very badly. So I'm standing there. First guy walks over and delivers a horrible pickup line to this woman. I mean, it was just terrible. It was so offensive, I'm not going to repeat it for sure. So she very nicely looks at him and says, look, I'm not interested. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I just want to be left alone. I've had a long day. So the guy tucks his tail and walks back to the huddle. And the other guys are like, how'd it go? And obviously he was shot down. Second guy walks over, gives it a shot, and delivers some awful pickup line. I think he said something to the effect, or ask her the question, are your feet tired because you've been running through my mind all day? Something awful, just terrible. And the woman very nicely looks at him and says, how can that be? Because I've never even met you. How could I be running through your mind? So she's getting upset. So he kind of huffs and puffs and goes back to the group, to the huddle, if you will. Third guy comes over, and before he can even get his mouth open to deliver a pickup line, she turns around and says, look, just leave me alone. I came here to have a drink. I don't want any problems. I just want to be left alone. And the guy says to her, well, really, he asks her, if you don't want to be hit on by guys, why are you here at a bar? Why are you even here? Of course, she responded to that by getting angry and basically throwing her drink in his face and storming out. So the idea was that a woman can't walk into a bar, especially if she's younger and fairly attractive, without being there for one thing. That was kind of the assumption. Now, I'm thinking, what would happen if I went over and sat in her spot and struck the same pose? I wonder if, at this time there were guys and girls in the bar. I wonder if someone would hit on me. So I go over, sit down, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Nobody comes over to deliver a pickup line to me. Chuckle. But you get the idea. Men and women are treated very differently in social situations. And that's an example of how that works. And society teaches us this, and we sort of internalize it. So, now, gender roles. These are attitudes and activities that a society links to each sex. Our society teaches us, and we can start linking this to mental health problems and to more psychological stuff. Our society teaches us what it means to be men and women. And we'll start with the male gender role. Guys, we are taught from an early age. I think about my life and the way I was raised. I remember being told, if you get into a fight, you better fight back, or you're going to get it when you get home. Or if you have a problem, you better pull your pants up, fix it, get on. take it like a man. Those are the kind of things that I would hear, and that other boys my age probably would hear. We were taught that you got to be tough. You got to deal with your problems. You can't show emotion, because if you do, that's a sign of weakness. So we have these images of masculinity and what it means to be a man. Big, muscles, aggressive, warlike, tattoos. I mean, these are some symbols of masculinity. The stereotypical characteristics of the male gender, if you will. Men are supposed to be strong, unemotional, providers. They're supposed to be macho, physical, independent, dominant. So these are characteristics assigned to men. And if a man doesn't fall in this nice category, in other words, if you have a guy who's maybe physically weak instead of strong, maybe he's very emotional, maybe he is not very dominant, maybe he's passive or submissive, then we start assuming there's something wrong with him. We start making assumptions about his sexual orientation, or about his manhood, if you will, and we do it in a negative way. Now, it goes the other way as well. There are stereotypical female gender role characteristics that we could discuss. We have these images of femininity, if you will. My favorite image of the woman from the 1950s in the baking her pies and with her little skirt and her apron on, suggesting that women are supposed to serve specific roles. And again, society teaches us these things. Women are supposed to be weaker, nurturing, dependent, caregivers, raising children, domestic. And again, when women fall outside of this box, in other words, if you have a woman who's maybe strong, physically strong, maybe independent and assertive, or maybe has no children and doesn't care about being at home and cleaning and cooking, then we start thinking something's wrong with her. We start assuming things about her sexual orientation or whatever, and of course in a negative way. So is there any truth to these gender stereotypes? Well, as infants, boys are more active than girls. This difference increases during childhood as well. So boys tend to be more aggressive. They tend to be more active than girls. Girls tend to be healthier than boys. Female embryos are more likely than males to survive prenatal development. Infant boys are more prone to diseases and dysfunctions. Adolescent boys and young men are much more likely to engage in unhealthy risk-taking behaviors. But is that a function of biology, or is that more a function of society? Does society teach guys, hey, we're supposed to be more risk-taking, we're supposed to do these things, while girls are supposed to be more kind of laid back and demure and just kind of not as aggressive? So we could go back and forth with that. In a classroom, I'll adjust my camera just a little bit to make sure we're good here. Sorry about that. In a classroom, there we go, boys are more likely than girls to have a hard time sitting still. On a playground, boys more often play vigorously, and girls often play more quietly. So again, is this biological, or is this a product of what society teaches us in terms of what it means to be men and women? Intellectual ability. Females tend to have greater verbal abilities than males. Girls read, write, and spell better than boys. More boys have reading and other language-related problems, such as stuttering. So again, is this biological, or is that society is sort of teaching us that, as men, we've got other things to be interested in, like sports and physical stuff, while girls are supposed to kind of read and write and be, more intellectual? I don't know. Males tend to have greater spatial ability than females. From childhood on, boys tend to have better mental rotation skills. They can visualize things, move them around in their minds. They're better with their hands. They're better at positioning things in physical space and understanding how that works. So again, is that biology, or is it just that women and men are taught to emphasize different things? Gender socialization. This is the process where we learn the behaviors and attitudes that are expected of our gender. We just talked about gender roles, stereotypical and otherwise. But this is the process where we learn it. Okay, and again, keeping in mind that sex is a biological phenomenon and gender is a cultural phenomenon or a social phenomenon. Margaret Mead did one of the most famous studies in all of the social sciences. She was an anthropologist, not a psychologist, but still her study has, and the results of her study have great impact on the social sciences and for psychology. An anthropologist from the 1930s, she studied 3 tribes in New Guinea. I'm going to preface this by saying that at this time, during this time in history, pretty much everybody thought that boys were biologically naturally more aggressive, and that girls were biologically and naturally, less so. Our gender roles, in other words, were biology. They were biological. They weren't learned. That was the idea. And Mead came along and said, not so fast. Gender is actually something that can be learned. And she kind of showed this. She studied the Arapesh tribe in New Guinea. That's the first one. And what she found basically was that both men and women alike were feminine by our standards. Men would wear makeup. They would take care of children. The Mundugamore tribe, she found that both sexes were masculine. So girls and boys, or men and women alike, were very aggressive and very warlike. The Chimbali tribe, she found that the roles were essentially reversed. The men were more passive and more effeminate, and the girls were more dominant and assertive and more masculine. So her argument here is that in each of these societies, Arapesh, the Mundugamore, and the Chimbali, in each of these tribes, gender was taught. And had we been born in this tribe right here, then I'm a guy, so I'm going to speak for males for just a second. Then guys, we probably wouldn't have known any differently. I mean, we would have not known any differently than to wear makeup or to be or act effeminate by our culture standards. So there you go. And we're going to call this the end of this part. Thanks.